All right. So last question. You wrote a book a few years back called The Humility Imperative: Why Humble Leaders Win in the Age of Ego. And this could be like a whole separate interview, but
Yeah,
and maybe it will be at some point.
that's right.
I'm curious, just I'm curious what the impetus was for the book, and what
Sure. No,
made
no, I
you.
think, and again, that's, I always tell people, if they ask me like, why did you write a book? Well, I was a young manager and I had a lot of questions, and I felt like I had things I needed to work on. And so, for those first couple of years after I was promoted into management, I would always kind of pick a topic that I wish I was better at. I wish I knew more about. And, everything from early on about like delegation and coaching better and coaching high performers. And there are all these topics that I got interested in. How do you manage change better? And so I got really interested in some of these topics. And what I found for myself was, it's fine to go read a book on it. But what I had to do to really internalize it is to make a little class and then teach it back to somebody else. That's how I internalized it. That's how I was able to synthesize information in a powerful way so that it stuck into my brain. So in some ways, it was a selfish thing where I started noticing that there were a lot of successful leaders, but yet a lot of them tripped up too. A lot of them would work really hard and they would have these great advancements. They'd be super intelligent. They'd be in these leadership positions. And then there was often like a self-inflicted wound of pride, ego, whatever you want to call it, right? And so this is the classic story. We pick the charismatic leader, we put them in a position of power, and then they blow it. And so I got kind of sick of that story. And I started looking at, well, how could you prevent that? How could you be smart? How could you be intentional about cultivating a different type of leadership characteristic? And so I got excited about humility, really looking at Jim Collins and Good to Great, where he said level 5 leaders are not only outperform their peers significantly, but this combination of skills they had was humility plus incredible ambition and boldness, but it was really for the organization rather than for themselves, right? So that was the initial spark. And I said, well, great, I want to find more on humility and humble leaders. And then I was sad to find there wasn't much out there. So it was like one of those where it was both exciting and also challenging, because I said, well, maybe, at first you kind of doubt and you're like, well, maybe there's not much here. But then as more as I dug into it, I was finding little threads of it almost everywhere I looked. And I got sort of obsessed with the idea, well, maybe I could contribute to this conversation in a meaningful way, and started teaching a class on it. And then somebody told me, well, your class is pretty good, but if you really want to give this message to go farther, you ought to write the book that goes with it. And that was, it was simple. You never know how you're going to affect somebody's life, right? And I can't even remember the person who just put that in my ear, that, if your class is nice, but if you write the book on it, you'll get this message out a lot further. And that has certainly proven to be true. And I wish I could thank that person, but that's where the idea really came from. Yeah.
That's really cool. Do you still teach that class?
I do. Yeah. And again, I've morphed it a little bit over the years, but I teach a class that, I think is the humility imperative. And I think it's a great one for leaders. A lot of times too, particularly I was in a lot of these leadership development and high potential programs, and they kind of teach you all these competencies and all these things, and they sort of build you up. And I think it's a great one to do as the last course,
right?
Because it reminds you that, okay, well, of course I have skills and I should be confident in those, but I also have to have a plan to remain humble and keep in continuous growth and learning mode. Because if I don't, I'm eventually just going to become arrogant, and my knowledge is going to be outdated and all those kind of things. So it's kind of that good one to bookend those types of programs where, it really brings home this kind of thing. Well, even though I'm pretty good at some of the things I do, I've always got to be trying to get better.